Hi, and welcome to a new episode of Don't Be a Man About It. Today, my guest, Tom Kreffer, an author, and we're here today to talk about the struggles of a new dad. Tom Kreffer, hi, and thank you for coming to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you. So, Tom, before we dig in, because I do know that you have a very interesting story to share as a dad, I'm interested to know, how is your heart doing today?
My heart is doing okay. Yeah, we got some news in the UK last night about the road to exiting our third lockdown. So everyone's feeling pretty positive about that. We've got a roadmap. It looks like we can start seeing our mates and having a few beers before the summer's out.
Yay, that is good news. I'm happy for you. Good. That's good. So, Tom, Dear Dory is the name of your first book.
It is.
And it talks about the struggles of a new dad, or tell us more about it.
Well, Dear Dory is what I would describe as a complete fluke. And I was about a third of the way through writing my first book before I even realised I'd written a book. That's the truth of it. So I'll back up and give you the story for the context. So me and my partner were trying to start a family, and it wasn't going well for us. We'd been sort of trying for almost 2 years, and then we started down the medical route to try and find out if there were any problems. So we had various tests, and the upshot of that was that we probably weren't going to be able to conceive naturally. Doctors said the chances were about 1%. And the reason for that was they found a few issues with my partner, and they just said it's not going to happen. She needed to go in for surgery to have one, possibly both fallopian tubes removed, and they'd also put us on a waiting list for IVF. So all of that happened in the sort of 2 years without success, the medical appointments and the news they delivered. That sort of painted a picture of optimism in terms of becoming a dad for me.
Yeah.
So emotionally, I've written it off, to be honest. I got to a point where I just thought, you know what, it's probably not going to happen. And I started to think of my life as someone who probably wouldn't be a parent. And then 2 weeks after we got the news, we had that meeting with doctors who said it's not going to happen. My partner started complaining of pain, and there were signs that she could be pregnant, and she was. 2 weeks after we were told all that news that we wouldn't be parents, yeah, she was pregnant. And that just blew me away. Absolutely blew me away. I didn't really know how to deal with that news, so I started writing in a journal. Journaling has been sort of part of my life for a number of years now. I think there's a lot of value in journaling, but I don't really use it to write. Let's go talk sort of emotions and feelings. I normally use it to write down ideas or track habits and bits and pieces like that. But I took it out that day and started writing about the feelings of becoming a parent. And then I did that the next day, and then I did it the day after. And about a week into the process, I thought, there's a lot to say. Not only is there a lot to say, but this is a useful exercise for me, a really useful exercise as to helping me prepare for my role as a parent. And then I thought, well, I'll just do this every day up until the birth. And I thought I might even have a book. But it wasn't until much later in the process that I decided to publish it and actually put it on sale so people could take a look at what happened to us.
I am not a parent, but I can only imagine the amount of frustration and the pain and all of these emotional roller coasters that a parent to be can go through by just waiting to have a baby. I do have a friend. She has been trying with her husband to get pregnant, and it's been a lot of years. So I know how it could look like for new parents. So I'm so happy for you that you got the good news, and it worked out for you. I'm so happy for you. So, Tom, no one educates men on how to be dads.
They don't. No, there's no
Usually,
guidebook.
a woman would have that talk with her mother, with her friends, with her, I don't know, from books, from shows, but no one does that for men. So when the baby comes, or even when their wives get pregnant, they don't know what to do and they don't know how to deal with it. All of those unexpected emotions like anxiety or stress, or after giving birth, the postpartum depression for men, because all of a sudden they're sleep deprived, they don't know what to do with the baby, they don't know what to do with their wives. So I'm pretty sure you have a lot of experience in that area. Um, Tell us more about your experience and then we'll take it from there.
Well, when I started journaling, I said there it was a good tool for me emotionally. It was because it forced me to reflect on my situation of what was about to happen, and I spent hours and hours thinking how I was going to position myself going into fatherhood.
Mm.
Now, my dad is not around and has never been around. I don't know my dad, so I didn't have that experience. I couldn't go to him and sort of reflect on my relationship with my father because there wasn't one, so I couldn't learn from that. But then at the same time, I turned that on the head and I thought, well, I can still reflect on everything that I think I do right in my life and everything I've done wrong in my life. I can still think about what skills, what life lessons I want to impart onto my child. And then the other thing I thought of is what I started looking at where I was most worried, what my biggest fears were going into parenthood. And one of them was actually lack of sleep. As silly as that is, with my partner sort of going through all the pregnancy and the labor and all that trauma with the birth and everything, mine was sleep. And the reason sleep was a big fear of mine was because I, like everyone else on the planet, when you're tired, you're not always at your best. And I thought that would impact my ability to be a parent. And I knew that with the sort of newborn baby stage that they're up, although that's a critical period. So I figured how could I address that? And in the UK, in 2015, our government released a new scheme where you can actually, the men can share the maternity leave from the mums,
Really?
which they can, yeah. It's a new scheme and it's not very popular. Admittedly, that's probably because the process on the government website is just horrendous. I had to read it about 8 times to get my head around it. But it is something that is available for other dads in the UK, and it's something that I took advantage of. So I
Something.
had 4 months off. It was great. I took 4 months off at the start, and I felt that would help me get to grips with parenthood. It would just give me more time at home. It would help alleviate the fear of not sleeping at night, having to go to work during the day, and then trying to fit in being a partner and a parent and all the other pillars of life that you try and pay attention to, and things like that. So there was a couple of decisions there that sort of how my thinking into parenthood went prior to when the baby was here. And then I suppose we can talk about like the first few days or the first few weeks, because how I approach parenthood. Because another thing that I like to do with journaling is daily reflection on how your day's gone. What could you have done better? What went well? Things like that. I use it for gratitude and things like that. So I did the same with parenthood. Really, every day we would take it one day at a time, and we would just reflect on the day, and we would try and learn from that. And if we could make it through the morning, then we could make it through the afternoon, and if we could make it through the day, then we could make it through the night. And that is how we approached it. We put systems in place, silly little things like in the morning, one of the first jobs would be to sterilize the bottles. And so the chores around, we sort of built chores and the jobs around looking after the baby as part of our routine. And the good thing about it was, because I took the time off, it felt like it was sort of me and my partner could really attack it together as a team, as opposed to me go off to work and come back and moan because I'm tired, and her moan because she's been with the baby all day, which is a scenario I don't know what it's like for where you are, but in the UK I see it all the time. The women stuck at home with a baby, and I know from experience that I know what's that like, both for people being stuck at home with the baby and people going to work all day. So I feel like that was something that I'd recommend it to other parents. I think now with
To take some time off.
I think so. I think the role of something I still haven't really figured out in my thinking is just what the expectations of a father are these days. If I speak to my father's dad, he'd never changed a nappy, nor was he expected to. He wasn't at the hospital when his kids were born. And I've spoken to lots of other sort of males from his generation. He's in his 60s, and it was the same. And I just think there's a bit of a shift in the
There is,
expectations
of course.
and I don't think everyone really knows what that is. I
Mm.
think that's quite uncertain territory. The good thing is that I see lots more dads. They want to be hands on. They want to be a lot more hands on with the baby, and so that's great. But all this change is still sort of layered on top of a world where we're already undergoing technological change and cultural changes at an astronomical pace, and then you put fatherhood on top of that.
Mm.
That's a tricky environment to try and navigate, I think.
What I'm trying to think of is men are by nature problem solvers.
Yeah.
So how could men accept that this situation is really not something that you could fix by saying that, I mean, a baby, when he keeps on crying all the time, this is not something to fix. It's rather something to find a way to deal with, because it's going to be on a daily basis for months. Or when your wife gets, I don't know, hormonal changes, mood swings, sleep deprivation, how could you deal with that as a man without jumping into this? There's a problem. I want to solve it.
Yeah, I'm very much like that. I love a problem to solve. I like reflecting on it. I like coming up with a plan of how I'm going to solve it. I do. Um, it, it's a tricky one. So I can give thoughts on my own situation. Obviously, all babies are different. For example, my experience of the first year of parenthood, our little boy, he was quite a good sleeper as far as babies go. Which was good, but then he gave us a few. We've had quite a lot of medical ups and downs with him, so we've had our own challenges elsewhere. At one point, we thought he might go blind in one eye. That turned out not to happen. He's fine, but we had sort of some challenges to go through.
So
But in
that
terms
must
of
have taken a toll on you and your wife.
it, it does, yeah. God,
So tell
if
us
we
more about that. How
yes,
did you
what the
manage?
again, journaling is I'll keep banging on about journaling because it's such a good tool to reflect, but linking what you've just asked also to like when we were trying to start a family, sorry, like some things in life you are completely within your control. Even if they're difficult to attain, you can achieve them if you just do the work and do the planning and put the effort in. But some things just are completely outside of your control, and sometimes people are quite good at accepting that. Like an example for me could be COVID. COVID's a great one because we've all got shared experience in the virus, and so for me, when the Prime Minister said, right, you're all in lockdown, that was quite an easy one for me to accept, because it was like, right, there's nothing I can do about it. That is what it is. I don't have any impact on the virus. I'll just get on with it. Bit different when you have those types of scenarios though, when it's with your children.
Hmm.
That becomes so with my boy, his name's Arlo. I try not to always name him because I've got a second book coming out that's got his name, and in Dear Dory,
Oh.
I never released the gender, but it's been out for months now, and I'm about to start promotion on another book. So I'll have to just say that we've got a boy, and his name's Arlo. So when he was born, I noticed this cloudy film above on his left eye, and no one showed any interest at all. He passed all the sight tests. I told doctors, I told all the midwives, I told all the healthcare specialists that come to check on him in sort of the first few weeks of his life. No one showed any interest. We only managed to get a referral because a friend of ours is an optician, and she took a look and she said, you need to get a referral from a doctor to go see a specialist. We did that, and within a few minutes he was diagnosed with having congenital cataracts in that eye. And that was just mind-blowing to us, because it's really hard to explain, but when you're given sort of bad news, and it's bad news about your child, it is like a just being shot in the face. It's a tough emotional blow to, and of course you're trying to make sense of what you're being told, so you can ask the right questions and be informed. But it's a challenge. That was a challenging day as parents. But it that experience, although that was quite
So what
unpleasant.
is that? Is he okay now?
So it turns out he was misdiagnosed after all that, which was I'll tell the quick story if you want to hear it. So
Yes, of course.
congenital cataracts is you'd hear of cataracts particularly in the elderly, and it's something that can be fixed from surgery. It's very different with babies because they're still growing, their eyes are still growing. So any corrective action you take at birth will be undone because they're growing and their eyes are getting bigger. So it's a bit of a long road to recovery, involving glasses and eye patches and sometimes multiple surgeries. So we were sort of trying to prepare what a life would look like, having to go to hospital appointments regularly. He was going to have contact lenses. We were trying to work out how you put a few-month-old baby in a pair of glasses and expect him to be okay with that. And so we were going through all of that. And when we took him in for surgery, again, another horrible experience, handing your baby over to the medical team to be put under a general anaesthetic. That was a tough one as parents. Again, completely out of your control. There's nothing you can do, nothing you can research, no steps you can take. You're completely dependent on the medical team. Very difficult as parents. Sympathize with any other parents out in the world that have had to sort of go through that. But then about an hour later, we got called into theatre, and he was fine. He was laughing, and I didn't see any plasters, and there was no bandages. And it turned out they'd misdiagnosed him. He does have an issue with his eye. It's just not as serious.
Yeah.
It's not as serious at all. So he's escaped surgery and everything like that. He has to wear an eye patch throughout the day, and he wears glasses. And he looks adorable, and we get stopped all the time in the street because people want to look at him, and they tell him that he's a cute baby in glasses. So he's basically turned a small weakness into a big asset that I think he'll leverage, certainly throughout the rest of his childhood. And that's what happened on that one. I can't even remember where we started off.
Well, I'm happy for your. It seems when I'm hearing your stories, it seems like you have lived a lot of extreme moods or extreme situations where you're either being told something really bad is going to happen or something really good is happening. So
that pretty much sums up parenthood so far for us, since trying to start a family to where we are right now. Yeah, that's a good sum up.
And this brings a lot of tension and anxiety, and what do we do, what can we do? So how did you and your wife, so I know that you went to journaling, but in action or in teaming up with your wife, how did you get through this without breaking the bond between you two, especially that when a woman is pregnant, she needs more care and attention, but at the same time, men also need to take care of themselves. So how did you create that balance and kept things really in a good place emotionally?
We just talk daily. You talk together. Yeah, I mean, one of the I don't want to use the word good things about the situation, but we had a shared interest in our child's well-being, in Arlo's well-being. So we were never at odds about how we approached it. I guess we had certain decisions to make about whether he was going to go in for surgery.
Yeah.
So that could have created some friction, both friction born out of a place of love. We only want the best for him, but there may have been disagreements. But in terms of how we deal emotionally, it's as simple as talking. There's nothing more to it complex than that. We just talk every day. When we got the news, when we thought he had the congenital cataracts, that was a rough day. I wrote down a list of reasons to help us get through it, and then we just spoke about that. I just sent her a message, and one of the main ones was, we were told we'd never have kids, and I said to her, if a genie came to us and said, look, you can't have kids, but I'll give you Arlo, but he's going to have congenital cataracts, what would your decision be? Would you say yes to the genie or say no? And we both said we'd say yes. If we had the choice, if it meant we could have him and he'd have to go through that, we would still say yes. So that was an exercise that we did quite early on. It was still a very unpleasant situation to be in, but that was something that helped us as a couple to get through that time. And what we do now as parents is, again, we try and talk. We actually, this is a great thing to do, I think, as a relationship system. We schedule time in almost like you would a meeting at work, once a week. This is really, really important. How you treat it as a meeting at work. And in it, we look at our finances for the month, or sometimes we'll look at a meal plan, really boring chore stuff. But also what we do, and why something like this is really effective, is we also use it as a platform to get off anything that's on our chest, anything that's causing us a bit of anxiety about each other. And the reason this is really good is because it stops you from letting things build up and then just sort of flying off the handle when a trigger point's been hit. Instead, you've got a platform, and we try and keep this in. It's not always at the same time, but we try and make sure it's weekly. And then you've got that system in place. We both commit to going in and being honest. And quite often we're both calm. We haven't had any of our sort of emotional triggers hurled, which can lead to arguments and things like that. So we use that time when we're both calm to have the difficult conversations. And we do that about our relationship and about Arlo, just about what he's up to, if we need to change the toys around, or where he is developmentally, or at the moment he's just coming into his toddler year, so he's learned the word no and more, so he is starting to be a bit naughty. So we have discussions about how we're going to address certain things. A silly thing like he keeps pulling off the cushions. I think it's quite funny. My partner hates it, so we're having to talk about discipline and things like that. So that having that time in is I think really good. It's so important for your mental health to have those conversations and to practice having those conversations with your partner. I think it has a direct knock-on impact to parenthood, because if mum and dad are getting on great, then the environment's great for the children. So I think it's probably one of the most vital things we do in our relationship, but it also hinges on sort of how we parent as well, I think.
Well, I really like that. I truly believe that communication is the key to everything. But what comes with communication is the comprehension of what's being communicated. And I can see that you have already created your perfect system to do that. I hats off. I like that.
We try. I mean, look, no relationship is perfect. We still get on. We annoy each other. I know I irritate her. She irritates me. That's fine. But we try and put these little safety blankets in place. And I do think the other thing, I think more so now that I'm a father, is I have an obligation to make sure my relationship is healthy, so that the environment is healthy. That does have a knock-on impact into parenthood. So I like that. I like having that onus. I like feeling that accountability, that the health of my relationship has a knock-on impact to my kids and how they grow and develop. So again, it's like a nice little emotional safety blanket
Yeah.
that just it just prompts me to try and take care of those areas in my life. I'm not perfect, definitely not, but I try and pay attention to that. And I think just having the awareness and just committing to paying attention, I think is you could be doing a lot worse.
You're doing your best, and that's more than enough. Tom, what are the things that you wish you knew before about being a father that could have saved you a lot of trouble?
I suppose when before the birth, I tried to, again, you mentioned about men being problem solvers. I did try and solve for everything. I tried to think of everything that I could do to make life as easy as possible, given that we're about to have a newborn baby. You can't really do that. You can try, but this is a cliche, and it's a massive cliche, and people will tell you this all the time. But the babies, they're all different. They're all their own little people, even if they're a few days, hours old. For instance, when Arlo was born, he was so chilled that the midwives had to take him back off us just to check him over, because he did one sharp cry, and then he was just silent and he was chilled. And they were like, oh, okay, we're just going to take him back. And that ended up being a big part of his personality, because with some of he was quite a good sleeper. He's not so much anymore, but newborn, he was quite good. So trying to engineer how your life is going to be with a newborn baby is difficult. I mean, it was a useful exercise in me. It gave me something to think about going into parenthood. But actually, when Arlo was here, I mean, you just can't. It's all down to them. They decide when they want feeding. They decide. I think either the second or third night that he was home, he was in hospital for a few days because my partner had an emergency C-section. So it was a few days until I could bring them home. One night he slept pretty well, and then the next night he just would not settle. And I think I was up most of the night. And there's just no rule book for that. You can't. No amount of preparation can sort of get you ready for that. They can't. Yeah. So again, I always fall back to just trying to get through the day. Certainly in the early days of parenthood, when he was a newborn, just focus on the day, because another cliche that you will hear a million times, but it's a cliche for a reason. It's true. Everyone says, "Oh, everything's a phase. Everything's a phase. Everything's a phase. It's just a phase." They'll get through. Yeah, but that is helpful to think about when you go through some of the more challenging periods of parenthood, I think, because if the baby's not sleeping for a while, or they're colicky, or whatever, fill in the blank, 9 times out of 10 it is a phase. Sometimes they last longer than others, but I think if you're struggling mentally and you're not feeling great, that it's not a bad area to focus on, to try and think it will pass. It might help you get through some of the more challenging times. Again, always talk. Something else, I was asked to write some content for a company about sleep, and like how to sleep with a newborn baby. And one of the things that in my research and I was reflecting on is, again, going back to our conversation about like what the role of a dad is in today's world. I think what's happened is, because technology and the way culture is, it's sort of cemented us all over the world, and you don't have that family unit that you have 20, 30, 40 years ago, where all your extended family are in the area and you could rely on them to help with childcare. And I used the quote, the African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. I don't think we have that a lot, particularly in the UK. Everyone's going it alone. I think people feel they feel it's challenging for them to ask for help for other people. I think that's a big thing. I think that's a huge thing, actually. I think that's probably worth underscoring. Parents, they think if they've got to rely on babysitters or their mum and dad, they actually think they're failing at what they're supposed to do, but they don't realize that this structure that we've created for ourselves, it's very new in terms of, since dawn of man. If you think we were hunter-gatherers for the majority of our existence, and then agriculture, the period we find ourselves in, like the technology age, if you look at the entire human existence, it's a blink of an eye, and then we've got this here. So it's very easy to forget what the sort of family structures were like, only one generation to a couple of decades ago. And I think it's worth thinking of what it was like, and then actually revisiting some of those sort of whatever systems they had in place to help look after children. So ask, you're not a terrible parent if mum and dad come over and just give you a couple of hours so you can get some sleep. You want to leverage anything you have available to you to try and make your lives easier. It's in the best interest in your children to be the best shape you can be in. So you have an obligation to try and look after yourself as much as possible. And sometimes that means asking for help, and you shouldn't look in the mirror and see weakness staring back at you if you do that, because it's not at all. There's a few thoughts there.
I thank you for sharing this, because I was just going to ask about how can you take care of yourselves as parents or as a dad, because self-care for men is also not so common. And asking for help could be one of the best things to do to take care of yourself. That's what I believe. So if we were to write, let's say, two very small lists of what not to do as a new dad and what to do as a new dad? How could you put it into a list or a brief?
Well, I guess with so I've got a few tips to for the pro what I would recommend new dads to do. So
Well,
I've got
that's
four points. So we'll give them, and then we'll speak to what not to do. One, I know I keep mentioning journaling, and I know I publish my journals, but writing to your children, I think, is valuable, really, really valuable. No one has to see what you've wrote. You don't have to show anyone at all. It can just be for you. But I think it's really valuable for a couple of
Yeah,
reasons.
I agree.
It forces you to reflect on your decisions, on everything about you. So if you're writing to your child about what's going on in your life, it will help you navigate through sort of the emotional uncertainty of your situation. That's what I think.
Mm.
If you're having a rough day, write it down.
Write it down. I
Find out
journal
why.
every single day, and it is a game changer. I wish a lot of people would do that.
Yeah, it's really powerful, really powerful. So
Yeah,
I'd encourage everyone to try and do it. You just start with just a few bullet points. You don't have to write pages. Just write how your day was. Just write what's on your mind. That's a question I ask myself. What's been on your mind today?
yeah.
And it will naturally come out, and then you can identify it, and then you could maybe work on it. So that's something I would encourage all new parents to do. Number two is something we've alluded to, and this will depend on individual circumstances and finances and lots of variables like that. But if you can, try and take as much time off as you can at the start. In the UK, typically, and I think in the US as well, you get a couple of weeks off, and then it's back to work. And if I think back to where I was mentally after the
Mhm.
first couple of weeks, well, we were still having, visitors were still pouring through our
Yeah.
doors every day. We hadn't even begun to think about settling as a family unit. So that if you're in a position to take longer off, I was lucky enough to take 4 months, and that was just a godsend. That was absolutely beautiful for me. I got 4 months at home with bonding with my son.
That's
I
important.
would never have changed that. And if we're lucky to have any more children, I would look to repeat the formula, definitely. So that's another piece of advice.
Well, here
And
they
then,
don't. Here parents or dads, they do not take time off. Only women.
yeah, it's again, it's, I suppose, different cultures,
Yeah.
different periods of time. But I see. I find that really hard to reconcile now, given my experiences that I've just had, and given how much I really threw myself into sort of being hands on. Yeah, I find that difficult to hear, but it's like that for a lot of places in the world. Hopefully, things will change, but these things are not an overnight process, are they? Yeah, God, mums they really are super stuff. They are. I've got a lot more respect for mums that look after the baby all by
But that's
themselves,
the
because
thing. That's the thing. Before you go on with your list, I just want to highlight that mothers are so powerful and they are superheroes. This is not to say otherwise, but also dads. I believe they should be given the attention and the care to tell him at least what should he expect mentally and emotionally and physically and socially. And no one tells him that. No one goes to a dad and tell him, hey, if you're sleep deprived, how can I help or how can I support? Are you okay with changing diapers? Are you okay with the baby crying all night? Are you okay with not being with your wife, let's say, all the time? Are you okay? No one asks the father that. All they focus on is maybe the dad not being so helpful.
yes, yeah, yeah. No, it's. I remember whenever someone would ask me, what are you most worried about, and I'd say lack of sleep, and quite often the response I'd get was, yeah, but you're not even giving birth. And I'd be like, well, no, I'm not. That's true. I know that much about childbirth, but sometimes it felt difficult to be able to have, particularly with sort of the women in my office. It would often be challenging to have that type of conversation, and so I can see why men feel like they they're reluctant to open up about certain things if that is the response they can make. But hopefully, I think with sort of more awareness and focus on like you say, on dads, hopefully we can sort of try and encourage them to speak up a lot more. Men are generally bad at talking about their mental health, regardless of their parents or just in any sort of
Yeah.
scenario. But hopefully there's starting to be a bit of a trajectory to move
Yeah, it
move that
is.
forwards.
It is.
Obviously with the work you do, your show is a good example of that, and hopefully there'll be continue to be more like it. But yeah, no, I did find it tough. Again, another reason why journaling helped me personally. It might not work for everyone, but I could put whatever I wanted in a journal. I can, if I'm want to write that I'm not looking forward to lack of sleep, I can write that. It's my journal. It's for me. It's my space. I can put whatever in. Another useful argument is to sort of try and encourage people to write stuff down. I'm going back to my list with
Tip number 3.
this I've got number 3. This one really shocked me. It's going to sound so obvious when I say it, but for any expectant parents out there, you be prepared to take the reins as soon as your baby is here. Now, I know that sounds obvious, but if you've just watched your partner go through labor, you will be a mess. You would not have come back down to earth yet. And so when the midwife then says, would you like to get the baby ready? That's a tough one that will knock you for 6, as it did me. So that's another tip is just before labor kicks off, before you start your adventures of parenthood, just have that in the back of your mind. Be prepared that as soon as your baby is here, that's it. You're a dad, and you're responsible for keeping your baby alive. I'll never forget when I was given the baby bag, and I just thought, oh, it's so silly. Of course, I spent 9 months writing a book about becoming a dad, and then my baby was
But
here,
it's here, and you can see him.
yeah. And then it was like, well, come on, and it's time to go. And I just didn't, because of the late, my partner was, well, it was a long labor for her, bless her. So there was sort of contending with the long labor, and I just forgot that I then had to start being a dad, I guess. So there's another advice. And then the final thing I've got on my list is try and take time out of your day to enjoy the knowledge that you are a dad, because what will happen, I think, yeah, I mean, trying to take time out in any day to be present is something that is difficult to do, something that you need to practice at.
Yeah.
But the early days, when you've got the baby at home, it goes so incredibly quickly, and there's so much to do. You're trying to get to grips with keeping a small human being alive. You're trying to get to grips with all the new systems that you've got to put in place, all the new chores. Like, babies are small, but boy, do they get through a lot of washing and things like that. And it just goes at a billion miles an hour. And before you know it, it'll be a month would have passed, and then 2 months will pass. Something for me that I didn't realize that would pass so quick is skin to skin cuddles. Like that's a wonderful thing to do when you've got your newborn. Good way for dads to bond with the baby. But it felt like I blinked, and then he was up running around. He didn't want skin to skin cuddles anymore. So try and take some time each day just to appreciate that you are a dad, what you've got in your life, and because you will notice the changes happen every single day. So you've got to take that time to just sort of, otherwise it will just fly by before yeah. Those are the 4 things I'd encourage.
Can I add one thing to your list?
Yes, please do.
So it's very common to see that moms, whether they are new moms or experienced moms, they have these support groups. You can see them on Facebook, just for moms. You can see them on WhatsApp groups, just for moms. They create this safe and supportive circle where moms support one another, whether it was about what do I do when my baby cries? What do I do when my baby doesn't sleep? What do I do when my kid gets his first tooth? They support one another. We should have that for dads.
Yeah, that's a good. That's absolutely essential, really. In the UK, it's quite common. They call it NCT, which is it's basically like a group that couples can go to, and they'll put the couples together that are expecting the babies around the similar time, so you can forge sort of friendships and things like that. And sometimes what they'll do is they'll branch off, so the mums will form their own group for the mums group, and then the dads will do that for their group. Yeah. That's great. Yeah, definitely do something like that. Maybe you've got other friends who are dads, maybe you could form a little WhatsApp group there. Yeah, great advice. I definitely second that.
Thank you. What about the second list? What not to do as a new dad?
Cool. There's probably a million things to do.
I can
Okay,
imagine.
um,
Well, one, don't panic.
try not to panic. It's so tough when you every time you there's so many new situations to get your heads around, but yeah, definitely try not to panic if you can't. It's easier said than done. One of my ones where I try not to panic but did was when we were introducing solid foods. And so you've got a risk of choking. I hated that stage. It would, a 20-minute meal time would, to me, would be like running 4 marathons backwards wearing a suit of armor. It was horrible. So you try not to panic.
You never hear such stories from dads. Like literally,
it,
I have a lot of friends who are married, but they would never share such stories with me. We just put our kids in bed and yeah, they're fine. They went to school. Yeah, it's good. No one really shares about their struggles as a dad.
Oh no, it's well, of course, when there's just no, as a dad, you're never clocking. Mums are never clocking off either because they're a mum full time. But if you're a dad and you're working as well, you're either, as soon as you get up, if you've managed to get through the night with uninterrupted sleep, you're dividing your time between working and then coming home and being dad. There's no, it's very difficult to carve out some time for you, right? Everyone needs, exactly, very, very difficult. So you've got no time to sort of reflect and just chill out, really. You don't have that, so it does become difficult. It's tough. I mean, we try and encourage dads not to panic. It's difficult to say that that's easy to put in place. Again, you never know what sort of situations you're going to find. One thing that gets commented to me and my partner quite often is that we're quite calm people, and they observe that may have an impact on the baby. I think there's something there. I think they're so intuitive. They pick up on sort of signals. That's why we spoke earlier about how important it is to try and make sure your relationship's healthy, because it leads to creating a healthy environment. And kids, whether they do it right, they consciously or subconsciously pick it up. So I think your temperament is something they'll feed off as well. We're naturally calm, so I wouldn't say that it was a parental decision to make sure we're calm all the time, but knowing that our sort of moods has an impact on sort of the baby is worth bearing in mind, I think, if you can, because they'll test that, they'll stress test that a lot, so you'll certainly get a little practice. But if you can try and do that is something I would encourage. Something that you shouldn't do is just not, we mentioned it about sleep and asking for help, but it's not beating yourself up about admitting that it's going to be hard. I think that's one. I think I do this. I'm guilty of this, and certainly was in the earlier days. You feel like you can't be annoyed at the baby, and you feel like that if you are annoyed at the baby, you're a terrible person because they're a baby and they're small and they're helpless. And I think you kind of tell yourself that. But then I thought, well, what did you expect if the baby wakes you up for the third time in the middle of the night? You're not going to be running around excited to pick the baby up and throw them in the air and play. You're not going to be Fred Flintstone with his twinkle toes running off. Of course it's going to be hard. Of course you're going to be tired. And you know what, you might get and that's okay. That's okay to feel like that. So you're not a terrible person if you just feel the odd bit of resentment now and then. Your job is to keep a small human being alive who, that is a tough undertaking. That's a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. So I think,
no, that's important.
Give yourself that permission. It's critical. Give yourself permission to be okay at not enjoying it 24/7 when you've got a screaming baby in the house, because it's not always fun and it's really hard.
That's very important. Thank you for highlighting this. You reminded me of my friend. My friend recently gave birth to a beautiful, handsome boy. And she's doing everything that she can. She's doing her best and an
Sure.
amazing job. But there was one day when she said to me, okay, I think I'm this close to having a nervous breakdown, but I have to constantly remind myself, he's just a boy. He doesn't know how to communicate. He doesn't know how to tell me what's going on, and I have to figure it out. But it's driving me
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah. And that's okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it is very common, but thank you for acknowledging that.
No, it's fine.
Tom, thank you
Any,
so much for being here. I can't even imagine the struggles of being a parent, but I thought it was really an insightful episode. It definitely, I can know that a lot of parents and new dads would resonate with this, and I wanted to focus on, dad's mental health for a change from a dad's perspective. One thing that I would like to maybe just briefly go through, how can a dad support himself emotionally and his mental health, and at the same time, his wife during pregnancy?
Yeah, that's a challenging one as well, because if I just take my own situation, I'd be very careful what I say now, because I don't want to offend any pregnant women out in the world. But if I just take my own situation, because I can say what I like about, there's a book about my partner being
Don't
pregnant, so
worry, only dads will be listening to this.
okay. um, but when of the changes that a woman goes through while being pregnant, there's the cliche hormones, things like that. But again, that's cliche for a reason. Living with my partner was quite challenging at times. The road rage she exhibited was just scary stuff at times. So what you're trying to do is you're trying, not only are you trying to get ready for the biggest identity shift you'll ever undergo as a man, but you're also trying to get through the pregnancy with your partner, who is likely to be quite temperamental at times,
Yeah,
prone to, you know, getting upset or crying or just verbally attacking you for being in the same room as her. You go through all those things like that. Again, what I tried to do was, we've alluded to it early on in the conversation, is lots of talking, and I try to be very mindful of her mood in the room, and I try to sort of read the room, as it were, and then base my behavior on that. So sometimes I could tell she didn't want me to talk to her, and that was fine. I would just read the room. Sometimes she was quite upset and she didn't want to talk, but she just wanted a cuddle. Something as simple as like that. So that would be a bit of advice. Maybe try and just try and sort of empathize with the amount of hormonal changes your partner will be going through, and then try and act off that, basically.
the
So
communication and
that's
empathy.
yeah. I mean, it's I feel like it's those, we've alluded to those quite a lot on this conversation, and they're simple things, but they're so important,
Powerful,
and
so
they're often
powerful.
ignored. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's the thing. That's the thing is that. So I had Leon Logothetes on my show, and we were talking about kindness.
Yeah.
So we said that I told him it's so weird and it's so it I can't wrap my head around the fact that we are living in an age where we still need to remind people of the basics, like kindness and
Mhm.
compassion and empathy, and talk to each other, listen to each other. I can't wrap my head around it, but it's so true.
Yeah, I think so what I do in my books, I did it in Deodori, and I've done it in this one, is I wrote a letter, and I wrote a letter with some of the important lessons that I would like to pass on. And when I was writing the follow up, Dear Arlo, one of the things I wrote in the letter was about lessons that you learn and lessons that you practice. And lessons that you learn could be something like riding a bike or speaking another language, counting to 10, cooking a meal, something like that. Once you've learned those lessons, you retain it and you can pretty much do it forever. Um, but some lessons you can't learn. Some take a daily practices, like empathy, like kindness,
Mm.
like parenting, like being a partner. And I think those daily reminders to practice at them each day. And I think thinking about it in that framework, that really helps me. So if I've had a bad day and maybe I've been a bit resentful to my partner, I just think, well, today didn't go right, but it's something that I'm going to practice each day and every day. And what that framework does is, it doesn't mean that you're completely immune to feeling resentment or, you know, to taking things for granted. But what it does mean, it reduces the chances of that happening.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I've thought a lot about this year, and something that I would certainly I want to pass on to my kids, and I would recommend it to other people. I think that helps.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And sending a lot of love and light to your wife and son.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being on the show, Tom. Uh, Anything else you'd like to add?
No, if you want to come, if anyone wants to ask me any questions or come and say hello, I'm on Instagram, Tom_Kreffer, Facebook official Tom Kreffer, or you can just search.
We'll add them next to the in the description. We'll add all of them.
Oh, brilliant! Oh, cool. In that case, yeah, just come and say hi. And if you are an expecting parent, best of luck. You're in for a wild ride.
Thank you, and
Thank you.